your whole story is like a series of people that came in your life, starting with your mother and how you were born, that came in your life, and all of a sudden, like this gift unfolded. Can you tell us about, first of all, your mother, Louise Pearl, and what happened there when she gave birth to you?
Well, I can tell you the way she explains it. She was on the, I guess, bed or table
Yeah.
in the delivery room, and she felt little engines or motors starting in her feet and her ankles that were very loud, very loud. They were so loud she was looking at the doctors and everyone else in the room to see why they didn't seem disturbed by this sound. And she felt them further ascending up through her body, into her knees, into her hips, and she tried to stop them because somehow she knew that once they got to her heart, she would die. And it continued, moving up, and she didn't want to die, and she didn't want to die, and suddenly it got to her heart, and suddenly she was somewhere else. She was passing through layers, levels maybe, of beings who had left the body. She doesn't recall specifically what the first or the second level was. The third one that she passed through was the only one that was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for those who were on that plane, and it was uncomfortable for those passing through. And that was the plane of the people who had taken their own lives. It felt as if they were detained there, delayed there for an extended period. She does feel that they do eventually continue through the cycle. But that was the one way she instantly understood. That was the one thing that we can do to interrupt God's plan. Mm-hmm. I said, do you mean it's like cheating? She said, no, it's different. It just is an interruption of God's plan. I mean, this is the second chapter of the book. It was the most difficult chapter for me to write because I had to spend so much time on the phone with my mother trying to get it just right. And even here, the words don't come exactly to describe what was there. But as she continued moving upward, she suddenly, well, first, she passed through levels of beings. You see everyone for who and what they are, clearly, without any facade. You recognize interactions and roles they have. You see people who have interacted with you from this lifetime, from other lifetimes. She passed through. She saw flowers of colors she had never seen before, never seen the flowers, never seen the colors, and continued. And suddenly, she was on a lane, which is what a lot of people tend to speak of as moving through a tunnel. For her, it was more of a lane. She wasn't walking, but she was moving. She was drifting along. And way down the far end, she saw this light, a really bright light. She didn't want to look at it because she was afraid it was so bright that it would hurt her eyes. But she couldn't help but look. And it became clear that there was no body, there was nothing to hurt, and it didn't hurt. She was brought towards the light, recognized immediately that this is home. This is where we all come from. This is all where we go to. And suddenly her life was laid out before her. There was no judgment, and yet she knew it was a good life, which I know sounds a little contradictory, to be without judgment and know it's good, but we view things on such a linear aspect here, and it made sense then. And she began to have an instant understanding of the secrets of the universe, why the grass is green, why the earth is round, why the sky is blue, how war is a temporary state of barbarism that we are going through, and we will get through that, we will get beyond that, but how utterly ridiculous it is for young men and now young women to go out and die fighting the battles of older men and women. She understood everything. It was such a wonderful place. And then suddenly, she found herself being sent back. And now for all the fighting and the struggling she did not to die in the first place, now she didn't want to leave. but she was being sent back. She knew she was programmed to forget all of the insights that she had, and she truly focused as hard as possible to hold on to these that she came back with, and she was told she had to come back to raise her son. And the next thing we know, there she was, and there I was. So I guess I was attached still to the umbilical cord while this process was going on.
And what were the doctors saying at the time? Because none of them would
Doctors
admit
didn't-
really what was going on.
Doctors didn't talk about that at the time.
Yeah.
She had an old-style country woman doctor.
Yeah.
Didn't talk about those things. But when she asked the practical nurse there what had happened, the practical nurse looked around because she knew she wasn't supposed to say anything, and it showed on her face. She said, "All I can tell you is, you were very lucky." The woman in the next bed, when my mother came to, said, "You were reciting scripture in tongues." My mother doesn't know the Bible in English, and she certainly doesn't speak any languages. So something occurred.